Luke, you're known, I think, among your family as being just this avid outdoorsman, this big hunter, all of these things. Is this true or is that not accurate?
Travis, I wish I could say that I had all those tendencies. I don't. You want me to tell a story about it?
Come on.
I don't know. Okay, so here we go. This is a little bit. We're going to really get to know each other here. So, I grew up as an adopted child in a
Okay.
household in northern Minnesota in a town of 7,000 people.
Sounds cold.
It was very. At certain times of the year, surprisingly, the summers are very nice, but 4 full seasons, and in the third season of the year, the fall, we do this thing called hunting. I don't. Do you hunt, Travis?
I do not. So you'll have to really describe this to me.
Yeah. People are shocked that I do because people don't generally describe me as gruff, manly, outdoorsy, woodsy. Those aren't adjectives that have been used. And shockingly, when I was younger, those weren't adjectives that people used about me either. And so I'm growing up in this household with loving parents, my mom and dad, and my dad coming from a even smaller town upbringing. His dad was a lumberjack. They literally hunted for food on the table, but it was also one of the sports that he loved. I always love to tell the story. He used to bring his shotgun to school on the bus. This is back in the 1960s.
My goodness, that wouldn't fly today.
I know. He'd carry it. He and his buddy Danny would carry it onto the bus, and it had to be in the bag to get onto
the big bag.
And then the bus driver would hand them the shotgun, and they would go into the school with the shotgun.
Oh, I don't like this at all.
This was my dad's upbringing.
My goodness.
The principal's office, and they would go back on the bus and ask the bus driver to drop them off in a random field. And that random field is where they would go shoot things. Okay. So in my dad, this is a part of his DNA. It's his heart. It's what he lives for in the fall. He's a little bit older today, and he's still, even if he doesn't want to carry a gun or a rifle, he's out there just walking the fields. And so little Luke's out there.
What age is little Luke?
Well, you can start hunting in Minnesota at 12. So, you need to be groomed. So starting at about the age of 3, I'm shadowing, learning.
Wow.
And then by the time you get your gun safety, you're in the position to hold that gun and shoot something.
Okay.
So I'm not, not necessarily wired like that, but, I didn't really have any choice. So my dad carries me out to a field, a couple times a weekend. So that's many times in the year.
Yeah.
And we do ducks, pheasants, deer. And in my favorite case, and I think we're all looking at this on the phone. I had sent you this picture.
This is why I brought it up. This picture, I think it says everything.
It's my wife's favorite picture. So she goes home and she sees this on the wall, and she's like, "What are you holding?" And it's a turkey about the size of me.
I was going to say that is a large turkey.
It is a very large turkey because we were on a turkey hunt, and there's my dad.
Which one's your dad? Right or left of you? The green,
the right, yeah,
jacket, the right,
orange. Yep, there's my dad, Dennis. He looks giddy. The two family friends, the owner of the farm we hunted on, and his son. They're having a great time for us. They're just happy for us. And then you zoom in on my face, and it's a mixture of disgust, anger, and apathy.
Oh, it's good.
What am I doing? And then you notice that I'm gingerly holding this turkey by a rope. Not its neck, not its leg.
Oh, I thought that was like the foot. That is literally not even the turkey.
No, because I didn't really want to hold the turkey. I mean, that's gross. And so that's my upbringing.
Listen, this could not be a better introduction to the man, Luke Winskowski. I love this photo. I can't wait for others to see it.
Let's be honest. Life's messy. Decisions are complex. And it's not all black and white. But these are the decisions that shape our growth. Welcome to The Tension. Let's get into it.
All right. Welcome to The Tension. We have a great one for you here today. We have Luke Winskowski, president of 49 Financial, one of my best buddies, and he's going to talk about a tension that I think, given his background and all the things you're going to hear about him today, I think he's the perfect person to talk about it. And it is the tension of nature versus nurture. this is a topic, obviously, that's been studied. There's many books, articles, all sorts of things about it. But we in this podcast, we don't believe that if we're going to talk about things that they can be solved, right? These are tensions that we have to learn to manage through. Sometimes we have to live in a both and life, and it isn't an either or. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing from Luke today. Luke, thanks for being on the podcast.
You bet. Happy to be here.
So this idea, nature versus nurture, right? I mean, like I said, so many people have studied it, talked about it. But before we go into just how you view it and some practical tips, maybe as people are even trying to figure out, like, how is that even defining their own identity? Do you mind just giving us like your background? I mean, where do you come from? Talk about this whole nature, nurture. How did this all become something that today you can speak so eloquently about and really understand your identity? Where did it start?
Yeah, and I don't know if I can speak eloquently about it. This is one of those.
I know you can.
I can speak about it, and so I'll start with my own personal story. As an adopted child, adopted at birth, I was born to a teenage mother, and I had two parents, my mom and dad, Dennis and Carol, who couldn't have their own children. And through a local, it was actually Lutheran Social Service up in Minnesota, they were matched with me. And that was an amazing process for them. I, of course, remember none of it, and grew up unknowingly in the household at the time with two loving parents. They chose to tell me since the day I could remember, and in fact, I had a prayer above my bed about what it was to be an adopted child, and it was always a part of my identity. And it wasn't until, I don't know exactly when kids actually start thinking about, it's probably their early teenage years where they start thinking about who they are. Yeah. And you really start realizing, like, oh, geez, like, everyone's telling Johnny, my buddy over here, that, boy, you're starting to look like your dad every day. And nobody's telling me that, because I don't look anything like dad, And then my brother and I, my brother's adopted, different mother. When we were young, we were both Caucasian. So people would say, oh, isn't it cute? They're brothers. And then it became pretty clear that we too were a little different, and in a lot of ways. Sure. And you become very aware of this thing called nature. And nature, one of the expressions of nature is how you look. That's just a part of the genes God gave you and the expression of those. But it's also a way of how you act and how you your mannerisms and some of the ways that you're just wired. And it becomes really, really obvious because I like to say the example of families who like to share stories about how, we have 3 kids and they're all so different and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And I look at them and I'm like, yeah, kind of. But you're all really pretty similar. Yeah, you have different personalities and things like that, but you're family, like your blood. Yeah. And you become really accustomed to that. And part of the story that we can go as deep as we want to, but it's another formative part of it is when I turned 18, I had the opportunity to meet my birth parents. Oh, wow. Through different circumstances that I'm happy to share. But part of meeting my birth parents was, especially my birth mother, was this very visceral moment where I see this mirrored in myself, and the ways that she was, her facial expressions, the way that she would say things, move her hands, and just all this stuff. And it was so familiar. And it was so strange. And at the same time, having that disconnect from a lovely woman, but she didn't raise me. She wasn't who I call mom. And that's nurture. And so you start living in that, and it becomes real quick. Yeah.
Well, I assume also a little disorienting. I mean, that has to be a little strange to experience, especially at 18.
Yeah. I mean, yes. It's funny enough, before you know that, you as a young person, you kind of romanticize the idea of, maybe my dad's a senator. Maybe there's fame and fortune. Well, we all know.
How does that work though? So is it that you can know their names, but you can't, like, what all did you know? You said you kind of knew you were adopted as early as you can remember, but like, what are you even allowed to know? When you say you
Well,
fantasize, like what they were.
yeah. So back in 1981, when I was born, the vast majority of adoptions were called closed adoptions, and so there
Okay.
was a big firewall between the parents over here of the birth parents and the adoptive parents.
Okay.
And once you cross that line, all of that information went into basically either a black hole or a hard line protected part of whatever organization facilitated it.
Okay.
And it wasn't until probably the mid 1980s until that changed. And so today, the vast majority are open adoptions. But in the closed adoption set, or if a person's adopted overseas, that's very common. Can be very uncommon to find out who your birth parents are. It happened to me in my case that my birth mother was able to find out who I was through different means and reached out to my parents and asked if we could meet. And they said that they wanted to give me the opportunity to make that decision for myself. And we know how that went.
Yeah.
And then there is this little thing called serendipity, which also leads to the world's craziest circumstances. I bought my first automobile unknowingly from my birth father, who happened to live in the town that I grew up in.
No way.
Yeah. And I
And you had no idea.
No idea. I didn't have any idea. He had an idea, I understand. But to this day, it still blows my mind because I was with my father.
Wow.
I'd saved up money to buy this used Pontiac Grand Am, and this guy comes and shows me the car, sells it to me, and I still remember him. And it's probably again because of there's this unusual interaction, but I had no context for it. And I buy this car, and it was we're driving away, and my dad said, "I didn't want to tell you in the moment, but that was your birth father," and that was
Wait,
kind of
he
wild.
said, and so you're what, 15, 16?
No, I didn't buy my first car until I was 19. So
okay, so this is after the 18. I see.
Yeah. I didn't have those resources at 16. So I mean, I literally saved up side note, but I didn't save up. I used the money my grandfather on my mother's side put away into a CD for me back in 1981 when the interest rates were at 17%. So that turned into $5,000.
This is why you're so good at finances.
There's a lot there.
The 17% CD.
But that's nurture. But it's not crazy because that is something that I think about a lot around what he did. And what I also didn't share is he was a railroad conductor. He was not a man of means. And so that was a big sacrifice at that time.
So let me make sure I have it straight, because I actually want to then go a little backwards here, because it's such a fascinating story, and I have so much respect for you. And it's actually, I'm learning some new things here. So you met your birth mother at 18, and then at 19, that was when you met your birth father.
That's right. Yeah. And he never sought me out. And I knew tangentially because she had obviously lost touch with him. She was a teenage mother, so that usually doesn't go into, a longer term relationship.
Yeah.
So met her, and back to the point, I think I in some ways looked into a mirror, but in other ways it was clear to me that the worlds that we experienced were so different.
Yeah.
So you think about the trauma a person goes through having to do that at a young age and give up a child, and that trauma, and my heart goes out to her, was real for her.
Yeah.
And for me, that is not an experience I had. I was adopted into a loving household, and that was never a part of my emotional upbringing. But, being able to share that experience, but also kind of appreciate the opportunities that were afforded to me. And frankly, in a lot of ways by her, because she made that choice, it was just really profound.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so many questions. And of course, you're even getting into something I want to talk about later on this nature and nurture, because I think there's like the nature and nurture, just like physically, like you said, like mannerisms, how you look. Then there's like the emotional side. I mean, there's just a lot that I look forward to learning from you and hearing from you. But going back, I am curious because I guess, I don't know what age it was when you said that, you first found out that you're adopted. Like, do you have like memories of that being like this moment that you felt this identity crisis type thing? Or was it something that it wasn't as big of a deal to you when you figured out?
I give my parents so much credit for this because it was so not weird. It was normalized, and
That's so
I tell
good.
this to everybody there's a lot of people today who still go through adoption, and I just plead to them to just let their kids know it's a part of their identity and to celebrate it. My parents did, so it was never weird to
Mm,
me.
wow.
In fact, I had a teacher once who, in front of the classroom, referenced me being adopted and was so mortified that she had done that. She pulled me aside, and it was almost as if I was going to go home and tell my parents and we're going to have a lawsuit. And she was teared up, and she said, "I'm so sorry.
Mm,
I, I shared that." And I looked at her and I said, it's actually a really proud part of my identity. I
mm,
don't see that as a bad thing,
wow.
because yeah, it I think, for me it was always, sorry, it's a little bit more emotional.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I was always positioned by my parents as a gift.
Yeah. To your parents, that's yeah, I have known many people that either adopted or were adopted themselves, and that has got to be one of the harder things. And for them to do that, dude, that is sounds like amazing parents. And talk about nurture, like explains a
Yeah,
lot, of what I know about you and the way you love your kids and the way that you see it. But yeah, to see it as a gift and a gift in your identity, and the classic, like, is this thing that happens to us, right? In your case, adoption, did it happen like for you, right? Or did it happen to you? And I think it almost feels like they framed it like, no, this happened for you. Like, it's beautiful, it's awesome. And so, brother, thank you for sharing that. So, I mean, what was it like? You get raised by these amazing parents, it sounds like, and you're adopted. It's something that you're proud about. You're seeing that. Can you walk us through a little bit more on just meeting your mom, especially just how that went? Is there any stories that stick out
yeah,
to you?
yeah. I mean, one of the ones that just was so mind blowing. I shared with you I bought my first car from my birth father, which is also mind blowing. But,
Yes.
I grew up in small town America. My parents they're people who love rural America. They love, my father loves hunting, fishing, all the outdoors, very traditional family, would love nothing more than to have, the next NFL quarterback in the household. And that was very much a part of, like, I think the hope, because as a person who adopts a child, and remember, they don't know anything, they're also getting this unknown thing. So they're like,
Yeah.
is the next Deion Sanders coming? And for a lot of reasons, that's not me. But as I got older, it became very clear that, like, yeah, I would go with my dad hunting and fishing. I didn't like to touch the dead things.
Sure.
I loved going to the city. I loved doing things that were athletic, but it turned out that I love swimming,
Yeah.
and to get me involved in competitive swimming, and that's something that still today it was where my heart is.
Yeah.
Now, to win the popularity contest in small town northern Minnesota, you don't put on a Speedo. Okay, that's like that's like an invitation for a lot of,
Especially in the winter. My
yeah,
goodness.
yeah. So let's just say that didn't get cool really ever. Um, maybe at college, by that time you're self-secure enough and all that. But you do it because that's just what you just feel like that's what you want to do. Okay. So I meet my birth mother, and I found out that my birth father was her swim coach, which
No
is,
way.
yeah, which is
The nature
nuts,
side. Yeah.
the nature side. And so, I just have always loved the water, and however that is expressed, I have no idea. But my
Yeah.
kids swim now, all of them. My wife swam, her mother swam. I mean, it's like this whole thing that just has permeated, and I think there's something there,
Yeah.
and so I
Yeah.
use
Yeah.
that as a really visceral example. But then there's other things too, it goes beyond the mannerisms. I've committed my career to, we're in the financial services industry.
Yeah.
Um, I love building things, as we're partnering together on that at 49. My birth mother has built a very successful accounting business.
Wow.
and shares a lot of that same passion, energy, and joy for serving others in that space. So a lot of that, it was just really at a young age, just really in my face. Like,
Yeah.
again, back to that mirror, it was very strange. Again, different life experiences and shaping, which we can get to, but that was a lot of my experience. And I think the last thing, and I think this gets to that, is because we had different experiences,
Yeah.
our emotional experience of that meeting was very different too. And that was where we didn't share necessarily similar ground. She had traumatic experience and was put in a position to have to give up a child, and had always wanted to, probably not have that happen.
Yeah.
And I had a
Yeah.
very different experience going into a loving household. And so we struggled to see each other's perspectives in that early on, as much as there was that more biological connection, if that makes sense.
Totally. No, I mean it had to have been so strange because yeah, I mean like you said, almost the polar
Mhm.
opposite is what nurture taught you around like hunting in these things, and you just don't know why you like love the water. Like I go back to that example, and then that's
Yeah.
what she loves and that's what he loved. And so it's just like kind of this mind-blowing topic of which side does it come from and how do we develop. But let's go into the topic. I mean, there's going to be plenty of
Yeah.
life examples I'm sure you'll share, but like, as you think about your identity now, how much of it do you feel like was nature nurture? Was there seasons where it's maybe more than the other? I mean, how do you think about that?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I'll do my best to answer. Maybe it's also important for the listeners to know I chose to marry a psychologist. I don't know what that says about me. But I met Anne Marie in undergraduate school because I was also a psych major. She kindly shared with me that I didn't have the patience or maybe the goods to be a psychologist. That's got me into business, but far better fit, a
Yeah.
much better fit for her. But I say all that because we actually studied this. I mean,
Mm,
my wife and I talked about it a lot. We actually took classes on it. It was really, really interesting
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, the deal that I at least believe clinically from a science perspective is we have genes, and those genes are expressed. And so environment shapes and expresses our genes. Our genes, though, really make up that core building raw material. And so an example of that would be I could have been adopted into a household of low morality, and
Yeah.
I may have developed in similar love for the water and similar kind of mannerisms and things like that. I may have I may have put myself in the position to have a moral bar that was low and embezzled money and went to jail. I mean
Yeah.
that could be the case
Sure.
because the way that my genes were expressed is as grateful as I am for the skills I've developed in business. Those same
Mhm.
skills can be used to commit fraud on people.
Yeah. To do bad
Those
things. Right.
Yeah, so we can choose to use our skills in good or bad ways, and our values guide our choices.
Yeah.
And so growing up in a household where it was a household where I had parents who raised me as a Christian, Lutheran, baptized me as that, exhibited values like the ones that they would expect me to live,
Yeah.
those have carried through my life.
Mm,
And not to say that that's, a surefire way of managing decisions, because we see examples of kids of great parents who make poor decisions, but that value helps express genes in the way that's the most, I would say, consistent with where it's come from. And so
yeah.
it's a part of the puzzle. It's not the whole thing. And so when I think about just the way that I express my gifts, it's in reflection to a lot of, I shared that story earlier about my grandfather putting a CD away to help me purchase a car. It's that same stewardship principle that I still carry
Mm,
through today.
hmm.
On the other hand, from a nature perspective, I think that there are just things that I am that now that I have my own kids, I see
Yeah. Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
the kids, they adopt some of mom's genes and some of dad's genes. My middle daughter, Ava, she has adopted some of dad's genes relative to her stubbornness, which is a beautiful thing. It's very helpful if honed the right way.
Sure.
But it is something where I see that same mirror up to myself, and you really get like smacked in the face again. Just like I did with my birth mother around that's a part of me, and I've passed that along. So that to me is so this nature versus nurture, it's more of a both and. It's nature and nurture. So I never really think about it as a versus. I think about it as an and it's really knowing how we're wired and how we express how we're wired. Last thing I'll say on that is, as a business person, I also had to spend a lot of time thinking about performance in the workplace. Performance in the workplace, a lot of people think I can take a personality test and it tells me a lot about how I'll perform. And the reality is that is a low correlate to how a person performs. What is a high correlate is if you take assessments that talk about how a person manages their personality to achieve performance. The better a person can take and manage their personality to achieve performance is a wildly high predictor in success.
Wait, on that second one, what exactly does that mean? Like, what would be an example of?
I'll say this very clearly because it's very clear in my mind. Is it all starts with having high self-awareness and knowing oneself.
That's what I thought. Yeah. Okay.
That's part one.
Yep.
By the way, in my past, because my wife's dissertation was on this, but this idea of the gap between your real self and your perceived self, the wider those are, the higher incidence of mental illness a person is likely to have. The closer a person can push together their real self and their perceived self, the better. And it's even better if you can make your ideal self, aka love yourself, in line with all those things too. And so I always think it starts with if you are in a business setting or somewhere where you can have formal assessments as to what it is that you are and how you're wired. If you have people in your community, family that love you enough and are kind enough to tell you who you are really. And sometimes it's not all the good things. It's sometimes like you were a real jerk and you can be a real, fill in the blank during these times and experiences. And you really are able to then reflect on that. That's part one. And then part two is, and I speak of as a person of faith in this, like how God made me. If I can just then love how God made me, and then say, okay, if that's who I am, and I'm gonna love how I was made, then what can I do about that? And that's the really practical of what I'm saying when how can you manage your personality to success, whether that's in marriage, family, workplace, wherever you might be.
Let's go a little practical here, because I think what you just said and the real self, perceived self, all of these things, I mean, this is gold. And on this podcast, it seems like almost every episode we go to a place that tensions are actually just exposing where our identities actually lie. And, we've asked so many different people the question already, but we'll keep asking, I think, which is like, for you, how do you define identity? Like, you clearly have an identity in yourself. And I agree, self-awareness, all those things, but like, how do you define it? Like, what is having an identity?
It's the combination of a person's thoughts, beliefs, and frankly, their actions.
Yes.
Because I can think and believe things, but if I act differently, I am not.
It's definitely not. Yeah.
So go back to the alignment model of if you can bring together again your perceived self, your real self, and hopefully your ideal self. It goes a step further, and then you act in accordance with that. We label that things like integrity, but if you can act in accordance of that, that's an identity. To have a strong identity, in my view, is to act in accordance with your thoughts, behaviors, beliefs, and feelings, and who you're called to be.
So good.
That isn't always easy, though. I say that, and I also acknowledge that that things like emotions and our environment, back to environment,
Yeah.
sometimes get the best of us because,
True that.
yeah, I mean, I know you're raising, 3 beautiful girls. Sometimes they break you down,
You can have the
Um,
best moment of your
yeah,
life in the same
yeah.
hour that you feel like you might have had the worst moment.
Yeah, and then not so funny. Something, there's really bad things that happen in the world, and you could be
Yeah.
involved in some external event, a weather event, or something awful happens of another human that had no interaction with you.
Yeah.
And when we think about trauma actually changes how our genes are expressed. It is that
Hmm.
powerful,
Hmm.
and those moments, we tend to think about those as nurture, like it actually doesn't change you. But
Right.
the funny thing is, not so funny thing is, researchers have found that you actually change a person's biology when you experience trauma. Your brain changes. Nurture in this case, or the environment, can press into the nature
Yes.
and actually change. And this gets us back again to this whole thing of nature and nurture are so
Yeah.
important. And with the tension here, which we're leading up to, is that there is no resolution to that. So
Ever.
the
Ever.
only resolution is we get the pleasure of living into it and working it, and
Yeah.
it never
Yeah.
really stops. So you got to keep working on being the best version of self. So that goes back to identity.
Well, and it's such a great answer, and I think that's the hardest thing with this tension. Frankly, any tension is you have to manage it. Like this battle, like you talked about, that I want to go into more of. Just like it is a battle of self awareness. It's a battle to keep your identity, because your identity, to your point, could be flipped in one phone call, right? I mean, I think that there's just so much truth to that. So talk to me on this, like, how did you I heard you say, like, having people around you that will tell you, like, the good parts of you, right? But also the things that you can improve on. Like, but then there's of course just self-reflection, right? To kind of get self-awareness. Like, how for you, in a very practical sense, how have you gotten to the place of self-awareness? Because you're as good as self-awareness as anyone I've met. And you'll even, I mean, we'll have conversations, we'll say, hey, I can tell I'm going to react this way, or I can tell I'm feeling this, and so I'm about to do this. I just wanted to put a watch out. Like, you're so good, you can predict the future of like how you're going to be. It's like wild how good you are at it. Like, talk to the listeners out there that are like, I want to be a little bit more like Luke in that, because that's going to lead to way better life outcomes. What did you do to get here?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, let's put it in the framework. So, from the nature point of view, I'm wired more introspective, and I'm actually a tinge introverted. And so when I need to recharge, I will reclude and just kind of sit back, and
Yeah,
I will
yeah,
just naturally at times reflect.
yeah.
And that's always how I've been. And I acknowledge that some are wired to be much more expressive in the moment, and external, and extroverted, if you want.
Yeah.
And so I say this to the listeners: I say, you may find yourself on all ends of those spectrums. And for me, that is only part of it, because I'll go back to, on the nurture side, I get to, in this case, nurture myself. You have to build the habits and routines that, and surround yourself with the environment to allow you to activate fully the benefits of that. So for
That's
me,
good.
it's a combination of, when you think about things I've done routinely in my life, it has been the case that since I was, since I could remember, I have had mentors and coaches. It has
Yeah.
been a huge part of my life, and I have loved every part of it. I could speak to dozens of people in that mentor coach seat. And even today, I have mentors and coaches who I go to for advice, and I go to for counsel, and they tell me the truth. And that, to me, feels right.
Yeah.
And I remember earlier on in my career, I remember learning this concept of blind spots, and
Mm.
having a one of my mentors share with me that something that I had aspirationally thought I was not actually what I was.
That's the whole
And
perceive versus reality gap.
yeah, yeah, but it's getting people in your life that will be able to help you do that, and do that in a way that really celebrates you, but helps you really, close that gap. And
So good.
yeah, so that's part of it. Another part of it is just healthy routines. So I still swim to this day. Part of
Yeah.
that is I find it very meditative. I think people who find a space to either work out, a lot of people do it in music. There are other, I think my father did it on the deer stand, quite frankly. But
Yeah.
if you can
Sounds like
use
it.
some of those spaces where your brain's working in different ways, that's not just me making up stuff. That's actually that's actually a real biological fact. I'm not a brain science person, but that has been proven that when you get into those states of different types of performance, that you're thinking and reflecting different. And so I
Yeah.
always invite people to find out whatever that is for them.
Right.
That can be really, really helpful. And then, I think the third element is those closest to you. I mean, those are your spouse, your kids, your family members. You're not going to find that synergy with all of them, but creating that space where you can just be really honest with each other. I mean, that's so I'm big on this idea of, you have communities, and that those communities really help pull out the best in you. And again, science would share that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, but I mean, it's one thing to say having those communities. It's another thing to say habits and all of that. I mean, it sounds like you've
Mhm.
just been incredibly intentional on the journey towards self-awareness and this journey towards even being able to understand the whole nature, nurture, what makes Luke Luke.
Yeah, I've been intentional. I've been blessed and privileged in that journey, so I don't take all the credit for it. I have, though, run into it in a very thoughtful way because I wanted to understand it for myself.
Yeah.
So I've tried to really back to my origin stories. I've tried to really unpack that and really understand it so that I could
Hmm.
both work through that all, because there's a lot of emotions related to that, but also, part of that back to this idea of, if I believe, and I do, that this was all very much a gift to me, how do I pay that forward? And that
Yeah,
starts
yeah,
with me,
yeah,
right?
yeah. What's interesting in knowing you, you're also one of the most secure people, and so I'm curious to hear your take on this nature nurture when we think about insecurity. People are like,
Mhm.
I'm feeling insecure about this, I'm feeling insecure about that. Like, do you feel like that insecurity is actually, yeah, maybe there's some self-awareness, maybe there's the whole perceived, right, and reality. Like, I think yes to all those, but I'm curious to get your take on, like, are they insecure? Am I, when I get insecure, every week, every day, probably. Like, am I insecure of what's inside, like what you're saying, the nature side that I wish was different and I wish it was changed? Am I insecure on the nurture side? Like, what's your take on when people get insecure?
Oh, I think there's so many factors related to that. I mean, and let's first define the terms a bit, because I think that we sometimes
Please.
confuse insecurity and anxiety.
Mm,
So, anxiety is a feeling like insecurity. It's icky, but
yeah.
it's more of a heightened emotional state where I am pain avoidant, or I'm worrying about something that is causing me something that I want to fight
Yeah.
or flight from.
Distress. Right.
Yeah. Insecurity, on the other hand, is it's a state of being where I'm feeling small and insignificant, and also and diminished, and I'm feeling like a lack of worth.
Mm,
And I think that is something that happens a lot, back to this idea of the gap between a person's real self and their perceived self.
yeah.
I think that when that's wide, I'm often feeling that way. And
That's so good,
now,
dude. The
yeah,
insecure,
and
not
now
anxious and insecure. Are you speaking mainly to this definition of insecurity?
insecurity, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Anxiety is more situational and it has its own biology too, because we can be predisposed to anxiety. I'm not an expert
right.
in that, but that's
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's it. This gap between real and perceived self, and this ideal self of where I want to be. Now I have to deal with that. And
mm,
now you ask the question of nature nurture. I can be insecure about a lot of things. I could be, I could want to be, as a male, I could want to be 6 inches taller, and
Deion Sanders,
yeah,
apparently.
yeah, and I could say that is, causing me a lot of insecurity. And a lot of teenagers go through that because
Totally.
they're trying to, they're trying to figure this thing out for them, and this thing, beauty. I have girls, I have 2 young girls. I worry about that all the time. They're going to go through that, and the world's going to, they're going to wonder, am I going to be pretty enough? But then the nurture side of it, and this doesn't sound like nurture, this is the opposite of it in the kind of mother to baby sense. But the nurture side of it is the world's going to come with all these messages.
Yeah.
And they're going to push all this thing on people, and it's going to say, you're not pretty enough, you're not thin enough, you're not whatever enough.
Yeah. Thank you, Instagram. I mean, that's only accelerating that feeling.
Yeah. So this idea of having some self-resolve, or having this really strong sense of identity, is almost, it's a defense against all of that. And so when we think about like a person's resilience to all of that, all of that insecurity, it starts again with going back to, I know myself, I've come to terms with what it is, and I might even love it, and so I think that that's where, I even, saying it out loud, I even think about the important relationships in my life. Am I helping them love who they are, not who I want them to be? Because we can also put that on people. Like we can.
Well, let's go there. That's exactly where I was going, because here's where I have failed. I feel like one of the greatest failures I've had as a leader, and it started with good intention, but the reality was immaturity in my leadership, which was, I really love seeing the best in people. I think anyone that's a leader, that's part of our job, right? You see someone, you see what they can become, and you just try to drive that out every day. And I think that is on its own, just saying that, it's like, yeah, that's beautiful, that's a good leader. But I think every leader has, that's why people are following them. But I think where I've done it really, really poorly is, what happens when I'm not then telling that person, but who you are is still good enough. Who you are is still respected. While I want you to get to where I see this vision, this big thing that you could go to, I still think the person you are today is awesome. I spent so much time, whether I didn't have a lot of time, and so I was just like, let me galvanize and get them fired up by, you could do this, you can achieve that. Gosh, having coached some people now for 13 years, I've seen the damage I can cause by staying there. And if they're not reaching that, then that causes that insecurity. Like, you lead a lot of people, you've led a lot of people. Like, is there advice out there on like, how do you try to get them to, I see what you don't see in yourself, go get it, you can do it, be great. And also make sure that that doesn't make this identity crisis, insecurity, all that ideal self almost unattainable if it isn't something they can do, right? Like, how do you manage that tension?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say something out loud that, with all humility, like as I say it out loud, I'm reminding myself I got to do more of that, which is just asking questions and listening. And really, some of my best mentors trained me to really understand what a person wants. And part of that is asking really clear questions about what that might be for them.
Yeah.
And really stepping back. And, one of my favorite questions is, if we're having this conversation 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and you're looking back on your life and it went wonderfully, what's happening?
Yeah.
And just shutting up and like letting a person share with you what that is. And then a follow-up question to that is, what could get in the way of that? And then another follow-up question, and this is where I'm going, is what is your role in that? And letting a person really unpack for you what part they see themselves playing in that journey. We especially for people who are going through different stages of self-awareness, we can't necessarily through a conversation understand if they have a high self-awareness, but we can start to understand where they want to go and where they start seeing themselves. And then we can invite them to learn more about themselves through feedback.
Yeah.
So I'm actually just, as going through this as we're talking about developing the team in the 49 world around how do we help them through different types of exercises, assessments, and there's a lot of good ones out there to just begin the conversation. Yeah, that then has to be paired up with coaching or regular discussion in real world scenarios and having people reflect back on what it is that's happening. I think a lot of that's actually institutionalized within 49's development culture. So I'd say the bigger question is, how do we do it more consistently?
Yeah.
And how do we always have it top of mind? Which is why I started by saying this. I wish I would think about that even more often as I'm out there leading, coaching, guiding, mentoring. But I don't think there's a silver bullet. I think the silver bullet is probably more so, did you spend enough time listening?
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm sitting here so convicted, wishing that you would have told me that a decade ago. Because I think that one of the most beautiful things a person can do for another person is help them on their self-awareness journey in a loving way that allows them to see themselves, to your point, the good and the bad, that then allows them to really then move forward from that place to, I love that other question of so if you get there, what's your role in that? But it's you can't even really know what your role is in that if you don't know what ground zero, this is who I am. This is the good and the bad. This is how I respond to things. This is where I'm wired, all that stuff. And, as I'm hearing you speak about that, it's so true that the people that have impacted me the most in this setting, they didn't really talk a lot, and I think it's a great reminder for me because, I'm always talking. And that's just not going to help in someone's self-awareness journey, hearing about somebody else. So that is gold. Thank you. I actually took more away from that than but at the end of the day, you got one kind of closing. Tell the people about nature nurture. What do you want them to take away? What do you want them to be able to go do with this to better their lives?
Yeah. And this is going to be very practical, simple, and maybe a little redundant. But at the end of the day, just take some time, take a moment, maybe it's half an hour, sit down and write all the things that you think are in your nature, the things that, you've inherited from your mom or your dad, or if you're adopted like me and you don't know, all the things that you think you might have. And, and good, bad, don't worry about it, be honest. And then draw a line on that piece of paper. And on the right-hand side, all the things that have shaped you in the world. There's going to be a lot of people. It's going to be a lot of communities. It's going to be a lot of experiences, good and bad. And just sit with that for a second and ask yourself, how have those shaped me into who I am today? Yeah. I think it starts there, because now we get a foundation from which to start asking the next question, which comes later, which is, who am I? If I want to go through that, you can go through the same exercise of, here's who I want to be. Here's who I am, because I actually just wrote down all the stuff. Maybe if I've got a gap here, I've got to figure out, is that just because I don't want that. I just thought I wanted that because I had this external environment tell me I needed that. Yeah. Or is it because there's actually not a gap there, and I'm actually just not expressing myself in the way that really is allowing me to live into that? I don't have those answers for you. Nobody does. But those are the conversations to then go and ask somebody about, that you trust. Let's go. So I hope that helps, but that's what I would do. Luke, it more than helps. You have lived it. It is very clear. Anyone out there, if you get to know Luke, you will see everything he just said he's done over and over again, which has led to who he is, the secure person that understands this and can sit there. And I love how we started. Talk about your adoption journey was just such a beautiful, story, and using the word gift. I mean, it's awesome, man. From start to finish, all of this was amazing. So listeners out there, I hope that helped you on the journey of nature versus nurture, and we'll see you next time.